The IRA looks increasingly likely to be repealed or at least scaled back. So what does that mean for the fate of electrification? We're talking about things like the buyer credit for new and used EVs and even hybrids. We're talking about the expansion of the charger network, and we're talking about battery factories in the US. I'm Brian. Welcome to Futuraza. And of course, if I'm going to talk about those things, I'm going to talk about them with Randy Kirk, because who else would I talk with about them with apart from anybody else? Yeah. Well, it's a backhanded compliment. It's fine. Yeah. So, there's a increasing likelihood that the IRA, the Inflation
Investment
Reduction Act, will be scaled back or repealed entirely in coming months or years. And I wanted to talk about what that does for electrification. And again, who better to talk about it with than anybody but Randy, but you were available.
I was there. I said, yeah, sure. I'll come on your show.
And take the abuse. So, well, let's start with the buyer credit. Would elimination of the buyer credit impact EV adoption?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, come on, let's be real. The reason that they give incentives is because they work. I have been using incentives my entire career to sell things. We've got Prime Day tomorrow on Amazon, and, people line up. Turns out my product line is not big enough to qualify for Prime Day, but hey, if it was, I would be giving some kind of a discount tomorrow to get people to buy. If you lower the price, you generally get a higher TAM, a bigger TAM. It doesn't always work. There are examples with things like precious stones and things like that, where the perception of value, the higher the dollar amount, the more valuable it is perceived to be. But for the most part, the lower the price, the higher the TAM. So if we raise the price of every BEV in the country by $7,500, it is going to reduce the number of people that can afford it.
Now, worth mentioning that as the IRA is written now, there's a phase-in period with requirements for domestication of production and mineral sourcing. But there are workarounds. If you do a lease, at the time of financing the lease, you're eligible regardless of brand. So if you wanted to get a Kia or a Hyundai or a ID series Volkswagen, you would still get that credit applied to your lease. And no, you're not purchasing the car, but it is reducing the principal capitalized. So it is pretty big for all manufacturers. How do you continue expanding market share when the cost of your vehicles just went up by thousands and perhaps also thousands of dollars?
Yeah, so the way that you continue to increase market share, of course, is that you're going to have to wait a little longer for the price curve, your cost curve, you should call it the cost curve, to go down. So, Tony Seba, Kathy Wood, others that I think most people in this community follow and appreciate in terms of their wisdom. Elon Musk himself have talked about this dramatic cost reduction that takes place on these kinds of products.
Economies of scale,
Economies of scale. As you have a new product coming into the market, especially a tech product, you see this reduction in cost that dramatically happens. And the more you make, the less it costs. And so right now we're at, say, this point on the scale, on the curve. And if the 7,500 gets taken away, then all of a sudden you're back up the curve a little bit, only addressing this much of the market. And it might take an extra year or 2 years for that to be taken away. In Tesla's case, they've got a new vehicle coming out within 7 or 8 months. The $2,500 vehicle, or whatever it will actually cost.
25,000.
Did I say that? Did I really do that?
Yeah.
The $25,000 vehicle that's coming out that will obviously increase the TAM for BEVs. And there's other vehicles that are shooting for that lower price point that will solve part of the problem. But no, it's an impact.
It is. And 7,500 is more than you can get out of cost reductions. It's too much. It's too much to try and make up. I saw someone on X say, well, they'll just, Tesla will just cut their prices to keep them the same. And I said, no, 7,500 is the margin. And if they go to zero, which they've said they could do and would if they must, it would destroy the stock value over the near to medium term. Yeah. Wall Street will not accept zero profit. That is not on the table. They money is kind of their thing. So I think that would cause some real problems. Other people say, well, what about how it would impact? Well, then just, sell them FSD too. As it's completed, sell them FSD. Is that right? But it would take, at $100 a month, it would take 75 months to offset that loss. Yeah. It would be tremendous. It would be really, really tough to do. And remember, about half of Tesla sales are in the US. Interestingly, the Model Y in Canada and Mexico comes from Shanghai.
Yeah, most of the time.
Interesting.
Most of the time.
Yes. In Mexico, I know that apparently they all come from Shanghai, which I thought was interesting when there's a factory literally driving distance from here across the border in Texas. But all right. And by driving distance, I mean, it's going to be a long day, but you could do it. So then the next element would be charger expansion, expanding chargers. There's a big, 70 billion's been allotted for expanding chargers. We've seen people misunderstand and think that that's all been spent. It hasn't. Only a very small percentage of it has. There are people who think only 8 chargers have been built. That's complete. I don't even know where that number came from. Tesla alone has built more than that with their small part of the small part that's been doled out. And it does take time with permitting and planning and all that. If the subsidies for building new chargers is canceled, what do you think that will do to the charger expansion and to adoption?
Yeah, so on this one, I think it's a nothing burger. I think the money has already been allocated. It's already in the process of being spent. Even if the IRA was rolled back and they said, we don't like these chargers, I think it's a fait accompli. The states have already been promised the money. I don't think there's any way to roll this one back. Okay. Yeah. And by the way, as much as I don't know the numbers of chargers that have been installed, or know, the amount of money that's been spent, I have no idea. All I would say is, from what I have read, and not by people at X, but by people that have actually looked into it, I think it's been a miserable rollout. Just a horrible job of rolling it out. Not the least because they limited the percentage of the business that could go to any one producer, which, again, I have gotten so much business from governments over the years, and I've never seen a contract where I couldn't get 100% of it if my price was right. This is, for some reason, some ridiculous set aside for companies that are not as efficient. Makes zero sense. It wasn't even for handicapped people, or for women, or for minorities, or for
veterans,
or for locations in the country that are underserved. Or it was just said, oh yeah, we're not going to give it all to Tesla. That was ridiculous.
It is pretty crazy. I also don't know how those funds are allocated, and if they are already beyond the point of clawback. So if anyone in the comments has an answer to that, pretty please share. Make us smarter, the comments. The videos where we make you smarter, the comments are where you make us smarter. And sometimes much dumber.
Sometimes dumber.
Yeah, so much. But fortunately, we do get enough folks responding to those saying, actually. And then the third one, and I know we talked about this on your show, maybe a few days ago or yesterday, battery factories. Now, as soon as this IRA was announced, a number of companies said, perfect, we're going to build battery factories in the US. And as we reached election year, and now historically incumbents have a tremendous advantage in re-election time, it is unclear who will be president in 6 months. But with that uncertainty, a number of them have put their factory plans on hold, because it doesn't make sense to build with an expectation of this fixed subsidy per kilowatt hour of cells and packs produced when it's going to be gone. It's going to completely change the math if that's repealed. What do you think is the fate of battery factories in North America?
Well, I think there's a whole range of fates involved in terms of the battery factory, but let me start with philosophically. Philosophically, I think this was the best part of the IRA. I think it's the part that was probably the worst written because of the amount of money that was involved per battery or per cell or per whatever, because you and I have talked about it on your channel before. You can basically get the cost of the battery pack down to zero. And that makes no sense. You don't need to go to zero in order to be competitive. But philosophically, you need to have the battery business in the United States strategically. You need to have the battery business being produced in the United States because of the massive amount of electrical demand that we're going to have, regardless of BEVs, regardless of whether we change our gas stoves into electric stoves. It's going to be because of data centers, and also partially because of Bitcoin and the mining. The cost of the amount of electricity used for mining is massive. So you got to have, at this point, what was the cry 4 or 5, 6, 7 years ago? All resources need to be maxed. Every possible energy resource in the United States needs to be maxed for the next 5 or 6, 7 years. Until we get these data centers built out and get the BEV thing, also it's going to be a drain. It's going to be an impact. Elon has said so. So philosophically, we need battery production in the United States. What is the right number? Does there still need to be a subsidy? Panasonic is built. LG's is built. There's other ones that are. Obviously Tesla's is built and running. The new facility that's going to be in Reno is installed, and it's just a matter of when they're going to start building them there. You've got other battery factories that are far enough along, but it is a difficult situation where we have in the United States. Every 4 years you might have a change of Congress, and so there's losers every single time. And this time it might be the battery factory people that were counting on some of this subsidy money. And will that mean that they just stop making batteries? No, it probably means they'll try to figure out, we have another problem. I'm sorry to run off my mouth, but we have another problem. The cost of batteries has dropped so much. And so some of the decisions that have been made by these battery factories not to go forward has been based on the fact that General Motors, Ford, et cetera, are saying, never mind. And the cost from China has dropped so much that they can't compete with or without the IRA money. So it's something that I hope that if Trump is the next guy, that he and Elon get together on this. Elon is the smartest guy in the world on this subject matter. And I'm hoping that Elon and Trump will talk about it. If it's not Trump, if it's Biden again, I hope that he will call Elon Musk, fat chance, and that they could discuss what is the smartest way to get the strategic advantage that we need from battery manufacturing going forward.
You don't think Elon would talk to the president?
He will talk to him, absolutely. I said, fat chance he's going to get the call.
You don't think the president would take the call?
No, I don't. Oh, you mean if Elon called him?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Hasn't? Okay. So my concern is all of these add up to a bit of a perfect storm for the oil and gas companies, where they're able to say, look, EVs are not cheaper anymore. They're certainly not as cheap as they were a year ago, and they're not going to get back to that price for a number of years, while we wait for the technology to catch up. It's going to motivate the Fords, the GMs, the Stellantises to put their electrification ambitions on the back burner. And my concern is that the US will just cede its place as the leader in these sorts of innovations, while other countries and other companies in those countries are moving full steam ahead, firing on all electrons.
I'm already. I've long ago given up about 75% that anybody other than Tesla is going to be making cars, be making BEVs in the United States. I mean, for the United States market. Lots of other pundits have kind of already given up, say they're all going to be China. People even forget about South Korea, but China, South Korea, and the and Tesla, that's going to be it. I just saw 2 or 3 articles over the weekend that were saying that's what the future looks like right now because of General Motors and Ford's failure to get serious about the business and really jump on board in time. So I'm not terribly worried about the car business, although I think we should be to a certain extent. It's a strategic product also. So that is an issue that needs to be addressed. What about the strategic disadvantage of having only one manufacturer, US manufacturer, US owned manufacturer? Because I think a lot of these companies will own manufacturing plants in the United States. But the strategic battery situation, I think this is the top of the list. This is where we really need to be concerned that we have the ability to make a lot of batteries in the United States.
I'm still hopeful. I don't think a lot of EV fans understand the unintended consequences that the repeal of something like the IRA would have. I know in your show we talked about the possibility that it could be replaced with something better or just amended, but that's not one of the suggestions that's been offered yet that I have seen from anyone, even the people who are not important enough to make decisions. And I've seen a lot of people say, well, if this person is reelected or this person is reelected, there's going to be a wealth tax. And I assure you, those particular members of Congress or Senate are incapable of getting something like that through because everybody opposes that. Okay, there's all Republicans oppose it, and the majority of Democrats oppose it. And I would say probably all but one independents oppose it. And that one independent being Bernie Sanders.
So I have a perfect world. In a perfect world, I would like to see the next administration roll back the IRA on the retail side to eliminate or to drastically reduce the hybrids involvement in it. Maybe $1,000, maybe $1,000 for a hybrid instead of $7,500. I'd like to see a rollback on the $7,500, or maybe a phase out. Maybe it's $7,500 for another year, then $6,000, then $5,500 or something. Let it roll off, okay? Because it's just too expensive. It's just a massively expensive program. I'd like to see the cost of the battery, the subsidy there. I'd like to see that reduced dramatically, maybe even in half or a little more than in half. And then,
okay. Before you move on, because I'm going to lose my thoughts if you don't. Okay. On so the first one you said was which was the first?
Hybrid.
The hybrid makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
It needs to be based on something other than a binary equation of does it hit this very small, ridiculous limit? Makes no sense. Put it on a scale if you must. The EV credit, I like the idea of diminishing over time or even diminishing by units, like they did on the first round years ago, because it motivated you to move as quickly as possible, or something where there is a phase out. And then the third thing you said was on
the batteries themselves.
Oh, the batteries themselves. Why isn't there a cap like there is on used cars? You say it has to be, we'll give you, like $3,700 off your used car up to a certain amount. Mm-hmm. If it's a $3,700 car, you don't get a free car. Right. So I agree with that as well. And then your final point?
Gosh, well, again,
where I interrupted you.
Yeah, I don't know that. I think those were the three that I had in mind. We talked about the gas stations. We talked about the charging stations. I think that's a fait accompli because the states have already put in uh, their contract offer, or whatever it is, as to how they would spend it, et cetera. They're all being processed now. All this thing that has to happen. So I think the money is essentially spent. And I don't think, and I hated the idea, by the way, in the first place. I thought it was sadly ridiculous and stupid to provide some kind of a subsidy to set up these stations when Tesla was already doing the work, happy to do the work, and was creating a grid that was taking care of that country. Yeah.
I've driven across the supercharger network, and I'll tell you that it's great from getting from point to point if your points are both big destinations. But if you're trying to go in between and actually live in those places, it's never going to get there. The space is too spread out. We need more people involved with their own money to get it done. It's yeah.
Well, we just saw General Motors. We just saw General Motors hook up with Tesla for Mexico. In some kind of a partnership to put up charging stations in Mexico. We've got Europe.
Oh, yeah.
We've got Europe that is taking care of it on their own. China that's taking care of it on their own.
Right. On their own.
Well,
I mean, China's got a stick.
Yeah, well, they do.
So, and Europe's got a stick. The U.S. has no stick.
Yeah.
And they just sold the carrot.
I might be okay with a stick in the United States. We have sticks for other things.
That's not on the table.
But I think
there is no one proposing it.
That should probably be on the table. The stick I would have is with regard to something like maybe existing filling stations or something, or hotels have to, apartments have to, this type of thing.
Condos. None of that's on the table.
Yeah.
And you can't do a lot of those from the federal level, because they're all state issues, which means West Virginia would ban chargers at apartments because of course they would.
It's so bad.
So yeah. And by the way, whether it's a gas or electric, I think they just call it a go-go juicery now. I'm not sure.
Right.
I'm not sure what the kids are saying these days, clearly. So I do want to thank you for hanging out with me, Randy, answering some questions. In the comments, I'd like to know, what do we miss? What do we misunderstand, specifically in terms of what are some other unintended consequences we may not have considered, and what are some benefits we may not have considered? I'd be very curious to hear if you can come up with some of those. Everybody else, like, subscribe, do the usual. Maybe head on over to the Randy Kirk Fun Hour on YouTube there. See what he's up to these days. And, like, subscribe, do the usual. Stay tuned. Stay juicy, and I cannot wait to hear from you, clever robots, next week when I will still probably be in this corner of this room.